Lecture. Federalist number 69. The real character of the executive. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we're going to step back into the year 1788 and join a public debate raging across the young American states. The question at hand: what sort of executive should the new Constitution create? Should the United States have a single president, and if so, would that office be too much like the monarchy Americans had just fought a revolution to escape? Federalist number 69, written by Alexander Hamilton under the pen name Publius and published on March 14, 1788, was Hamilton's direct response to the anti-Federalist fear that the presidency would become nothing less than an American kingship. His strategy was simple but brilliant. He would compare in exacting detail the powers of three figures: the President of the United States, the King of Great Britain, and the Governor of New York. In doing so, he aimed to show that although the President might resemble a king in form, after all, he was a single executive. The resemblance ended there. The president's powers, Hamilton argued, would be far more limited and far more accountable. Hamilton begins by addressing the visual concern. Yes, the Constitution proposes a single chief magistrate. This looks on the surface much like the King of Britain, the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, or even certain state governors. But a shared form is not the same as shared substance. The president, unlike the king, would operate under strict constitutional constraints and within a system of checks and balances. Consider the president's role as commander-in-chief. Hamilton admits that this sounds powerful, even kingly, but unlike the monarch, the president cannot declare war, raise armies, or fund military campaigns on his own. Congress holds those keys. The president commands the forces once they exist, but cannot unilaterally take the nation into battle. In fact, in some respects, state governors, such as New York's, had more autonomous militia control than the president would. Next, Hamilton turns to the power of pardon. The president may pardon federal offenses, but not in cases of impeachment. This is a striking limitation when compared to the British king, who can pardon essentially at will, including for political crimes. Even the governor of New York could pardon in some impeachment matters, except for treason and murder. The president, Hamilton emphasizes, is also not immune from prosecution. If impeached and removed from office, he may still face trial and punishment like any other citizen. That is a stark difference from a monarch who reigns for life and is, in practice, above the law. The legislative relationship also diverges sharply. The president may adjourn Congress only if the House and Senate cannot agree on a time to adjourn. Compare that to the British king, who can prorogue or dissolve Parliament at will. Even the governor of New York enjoys broader authority to interrupt the legislative calendar. On treaties and foreign affairs, Hamilton is adamant the president cannot act alone. Any treaty must receive the consent of 2/3 of the Senate. The king faces no such limitation. This shared authority between the executive and the legislative branch was designed to prevent rash or secretive foreign commitments. The same pattern appears in appointments. The president can nominate ambassadors, judges, and other officers, but the Senate must confirm them. The king appoints freely. The New York governor works with a small council, but often enjoys far more sway than a president would. Nor can the president create offices or grant titles of nobility, an explicit safeguard against aristocratic privilege. Hamilton also highlights the fixed term of office. The president serves for 4 years and can be removed via impeachment. A king rules for life. Even a governor, though subject to election, operates under a smaller electorate and less complex checks. In the federal system, impeachment, periodic elections, and public accountability form a layered defense against executive overreach. Through all these comparisons, Hamilton builds his central argument. The president is not a monarch in disguise. His powers are substantial enough to lead effectively, yet deliberately hemmed in by law, by Congress, and by the people. The presidency is a carefully balanced institution, positioned between the hereditary absolutism of a king and the sometimes overly restricted role of a state executive. Now, Hamilton could not foresee everything. Over the centuries, the office has grown in influence, particularly in foreign policy and administration. Modern presidents command a far larger federal apparatus than Hamilton could have imagined. Still, the constitutional design he defended in 1788 remains in place. A presidency that draws its strength not from personal authority, but from the consent of the governed and the structure of the Constitution. So, as we read Federalist number 69, we see more than an 18th century essay. We see a foundational assurance to a nervous public that America's executive would be powerful enough to govern, yet bound tightly enough to never become a king.